Today we've got a joint webinar hosted by Dappens, but we've got Tracy Hudson from HR department as our guest speaker. The webinar today is either going to be a refresher for those of you that are existing employers, or if you're looking to take on staff for the first time, it's an introduction really to HR matters, and we'll look at the pitfalls of not getting the HR basics right. So in the next half an hour or so, Tracy, our guest speaker, will take you through what we call the employment journey. So that's from taking on new employees, dealing with your day-to-day obligations as an employer, and through to the proper process for termination of employment. She'll also touch on the role of cloud-based systems to track and control HR matters in your business. Without further ado, what I'll do is I will hand over to Tracy Hudson from the HR department, and she will take you through the basics of HR.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everybody. Really, this is just going to be a whistle-stop tour of the employment journey of your staff. So any of these topics that I'm talking about really are a subject in themselves. But as Richard said, if anyone's got any specific questions, then I'm more than happy to answer those, either as we go along or towards the end. So starting off with recruitment. This is a topic that we get a lot of questions about. We have to be very careful about potential discrimination claims, because when you're taking on your first employee or any employee, you need to think about how that you could be doing something discriminatory in terms of the adverts, in terms of your recruitment process, in terms of your interview questions. So it's something that you need to be quite aware of. I've got a few examples of some interesting, shall we say, adverts that I'll talk you through in a moment, which talk through some of the pitfalls. A question that we get asked quite a lot is, oh, are we supposed to use application forms? I don't think it's absolutely necessary to use an application form. People think that you're supposed to use them to do it properly. I think that applicants tend to prefer to use CVs, probably out of laziness more than anything else, because they don't want to fill in a lot of application forms. But it's completely up to you. It's up to you whether you want to sit and do an application form or whether you're happy to take CVs. There is no rule. The important bit is when you're shortlisting, whether it's from a CV or a form, make sure that you are taking notes of why you're rejecting candidates. And this doesn't have to be a big process. There doesn't have to be a fancy Excel spreadsheet. It can be a scribble on top of a CV if you want it to be, just something to remind you why you've rejected somebody in case it's questioned later. With interviews, we deal with a lot of small businesses, and the owners tend to want to just have a chat with people, and this is absolutely fine, but it can be a structured chat. So think about your questions in advance. Make sure that you're covering the same topics with every candidate so that you can fairly score them, if you like, or make your decision, and make sure that you take notes. It's awful after doing a day of interviews, you will not remember that first candidate that you spoke to and what you thought about them. So take notes about your thoughts on the candidate. One thing that we get, feedback that we get from candidates, is that they get really frustrated when employers don't respond. So if somebody's applied to you for a job, say you've got 200 people who've applied for your job as your receptionist role or an admin role, you want those 200 people to say positive things about your business. You don't want them thinking negatively about you and complaining that you didn't reply to their email or didn't let them know about that job that they've applied for. It is so important. It can have an impact on your business and how it's perceived. And the other thing is, it's quite nice to deal with requests for feedback. Employers tend to ignore requests for feedback if they can. I think they're a little bit scared about saying the wrong thing, but actually there are so many frustrated candidates out there who've been applying for jobs who aren't getting anywhere. It's really valuable to them, and they do appreciate it. But of course we can advise you on that if you need advice on how to respond to people. So I've just picked out a few of my favourites that I've come across in terms of job adverts. Disco Inferno on the left, it seems fine. Two energetic, young and dynamic individuals to take responsibility, blah, blah, blah. They didn't need to put young in there. Straight away, they could get discrimination claims from anyone who perceives themselves not to be young. So that's a bit of a mistake. And you can be energetic and dynamic at any age, can't you? The one on the right is a bit of an obvious one. They've ruled out the girls straight away. So again, leaving themselves open to a claim there. Moving on to the next slide. How many times have we gone into a restaurant and seen one of these wanted adverts in the window? I'm sure that the restaurant manager didn't put any thought into this other than his waitress left and he needs another one. I'm sure he'd perfectly accept applications from waiters, but again, he's left himself open to a claim there. And the one on the right is just a bit of a weird one. Male or female. It's a bit of a strange thing to put in an advert. There's no reason that they've put why you need to be under the age of 30. And the bit about being good looking and must possess a pleasing personality, well, it comes across as a little bit creepy, I think. But, you know, it again leaves this Max's restaurant open to a harassment claim, potentially. And it could offend the staff that he's already got working for him. And this one's my favourite. So if you look, fifth line up from the bottom, usual rubbish about equal ops, you must remember to proof your adverts before they go live, because once they're on the internet, they're on the internet. So just a word of caution, really. So you've recruited your new employee. Don't underestimate inductions. I think a lot of people do. It's so tempting when we're really busy to just point them in the direction of their computer, tell them how to get access to their emails, and off they go. It's a really important way to introduce people to your business. So you need to do all the legal stuff, you know, the health and safety, here are the fire exits bit, but make sure you take time to introduce them to key people in the business who they're going to need to be dealing with. And also, obviously, the general rules around how you work. But don't forget the little stuff like, you know, where's the tea and coffee kept and what does everyone do at lunchtime? It helps your staff settle in so much more quickly and makes them feel wanted. Contracts of employment should be issued within the first 8 weeks of somebody working for you. I like to issue them before, but it's up to you. I get really nervous. We have new clients who come to us to say, oh, our contract's fine, I downloaded it off the internet a couple of weeks ago. It's never fine. Please don't download something free off the internet. It won't protect your business. It might confirm your employees' rights. But for me, I write a contract of employment to make sure that it protects my clients. And things like restrictive covenants are so important. If you want to rely on a restrictive covenant, it's got to be very specific to your business, to your industry, and to the job that that person is doing. So it's not necessarily always okay to just put the same restrictive covenant into everybody's contract in your business. It's something that you should always get advice on. And also send out a disciplinary and grievance procedure too. Now, I wanted to talk about new starter medical forms just because our clients ask about this quite a lot. So we used to be able to do pre-employment health questionnaires to check that your staff were fit for work. You can't do those anymore. You can now do new starter medical forms, which you would send out with your contract and your offer and all your other bits and pieces. Those will be sent off to occupational health and you will get a certificate that comes back, usually saying that someone's fit for work, very rarely saying that somebody's unfit for work, but it can say that somebody's fit for work with reasonable adjustments, and then it would detail what those adjustments might be. Now, the word reasonable is the important bit here. In a big corporate, if they need to spend £2,000 or £3,000 on adjustments for somebody, for some specific equipment, for example, that's neither here nor there, and that would just be done. In a smaller business, £2,000 or £3,000 actually could cripple the smaller business, so it's not necessarily reasonable. You don't have, just because a doctor said that you have to do something doesn't mean that you have to. It's whatever is reasonable and will work for your business. I wanted to mention probationary periods because it's quite often with small employers where you ask if there's a probationary period. Oh yeah, we test them in the first 3 months. It's not taken too seriously. Formal reviews aren't done. I think it's really valuable for any business to sit down with an employee at the end of their probationary period and formally review with them how their time has gone. And remember that it's an opportunity for them to review you too. They might decide that this isn't right for them. They're constantly assessing that first 3 months whether or not they want to stay. But it's a really good time for you to say, you know, was it what you expected? Have you got everything you need? How's it working out? It is really valuable, so please don't ignore it. Just a quick mention on holidays. They're entitled to holidays, obviously, minimum of 5.6 weeks a year. I do see contracts when clients first come to us where they won't specify that the holiday entitlement is prorated for part-time staff. And where this can become a real problem is, for example, you have 2 part-timers, so somebody works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the other one works Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The person who always works on a Monday is going to get more bank holidays than the person who works Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you've got to make sure that you are pro-ratering the bank holidays as well as their usual holiday entitlement. And just bear in mind that holiday accrues during absence as well. If somebody's off long-term sick, so they've had an operation and they've got to recover for a couple of months, they're still getting their holiday. So bear that in mind, because obviously that's a cost that you need to consider. The important thing also is to keep accurate records. Only last week I had a call from a client who keeps their holiday records on an Excel spreadsheet that everybody has access to. And they were pretty convinced that one of their employees had had a holiday, a week off last Easter. However, that's not on the Excel spreadsheet, and now he hasn't got enough time to take all his holidays before the end of the year. And it's causing a real problem. And there's that kind of a bit of trust issue there, that they're suspicious the employee's gone in and deleted it. So you need to make sure that you've got a secure way of keeping these records. Just moving on to sickness absence now. I'm sure that whilst your employee is with you, they will be off sick at some point during their time. What I always advise our clients is to have a staff handbook and an absence policy in there, and that would cover a lot of things, but the basics. So who should they phone if they're ill? If they wake up one morning and they're not well enough to come in, when do they need to phone by? The person who's answering the phone can be confident that they can ask exactly why that person's off, what's wrong, and how long do they anticipate they're going to be off for. If, for example, somebody says, oh, I've got a bit of a tummy bug, I'll be all right in the next few days, it's fine to ask them to still give you a call in the morning. Keep that contact going. It's very easy for people to just kind of write themselves off for the rest of the week and they'll come back Monday, whereas actually if they've got to make contact every day, I think you'll find they start, you know, they'll come back to work sooner. They can self-certify for the first 7 days, but from day 8 onwards they need a fit note, so that fit note from their GP. And statutory sick pay is becoming more of an issue now with our smaller clients. You can't claim statutory sick pay back from the government now, so that is a cost that employers are having to bear. The first 3 days are unpaid. Sick pay doesn't kick in until day 4, so that's just something to bear in mind. Return to work interviews, I think, are really, really useful tools. They're very important in terms of managing absence. And from a HR point of view, I always plan for, if something goes wrong, what do we need to rely on? And that would be your return to work interviews. So for people, even if they're just off for a day, make sure when your employees come back to work, you just spend 10 minutes, that's all it needs, to sit down with them, check that they're fit to return to work, they're fully recovered, is this likely to happen again, have they seen a doctor, all those kinds of things, and just keep a note of it. If somebody's having lots of absences, then you would refer back to those notes that you've made from those conversations that you've had previously. And when somebody comes back from long-term sick, have in your mind that there might be a disability there that we need to consider. So if somebody has had an operation, for example, and they've been off for a couple of months to recover, that's fine. But is that because of something else, or is this going to be a long-term issue? So, I mean, we're always around for advice on that, but just have that in your mind. And again, it is so important to keep accurate records. I cannot emphasize how important it is, because when something goes wrong, these are the things that you rely on. So that's, I'll come to talking about the system that we recommend our clients use. your employees may have a baby whilst they're off. So we all know maternity leave can be up to a year. 39 weeks of that is paid at statutory maternity pay. The men can take 2 weeks off when their babies are born. What you may not know is that shared parental leave is coming in. This will be for babies that are born on or after the 5th of April next year. This is a whole topic in itself, and actually there's a lot of unanswered questions around shared parental leave that we're still waiting on, and it's going to be quite difficult to manage. We've got to think about how it's going to be managed when parents are employed by different employers. A few key points there that I won't bore you with right now, but if you have anybody who's pregnant who has babies due after April next year, then I'm more than happy to talk that through with you in more detail separately. So then moving on to common issues when parents return to work, we get calls about these all the time at the HR department. So flexible working, with the women in particular, they don't necessarily always want to come back to a full-time role, so more often than not you're having people who want to work part-time or reduced hours, or all the full-time hours in 4 days or something like that. It's important that you get advice when you get a flexible working request, particularly if it's something that you can't accommodate. There is a specific process that you need to go through in terms of meetings, in terms of letters that you have to send. I would always offer the right to appeal if they don't agree with the outcome of a flexible working request, so please always get advice. Time off for dependent emergencies is actually something that we get asked about all the time. Now, this would be, for example, their child is ill, so they have to stay at home because they can't go to nursery. That is an emergency. It's happened that day. They can't go into work. They'll sort something out over the next couple of days. It is unpaid time off, so don't pay for this time. It is unpaid. Some employers allow parents to take holidays or whatever it might be, and that's an informal arrangement. That's absolutely fine. What isn't covered is, for example, the school will be closed in 3 weeks' time for teacher training. That is not an emergency. You have plenty of time to plan for that. You could either book, the employee could book holidays or arrange alternative childcare. It's not an emergency. So if one of these issues arises, feel free to pick up the phone and I can give you advice on that at the time. Appraisals, I think, just go to the bottom of a lot of to-do lists, to be honest, in small businesses when it's not a formalised, structured appraisal system. I think that they're important. I think they're really useful. I think that employees appreciate appraisals when they're done properly. So employees won't appreciate it if it's a tick box exercise. What it should be used for is having a proper sit down, and this can be annually or it could be quarterly, whatever suits your business, proper sit down with your employee to talk about where the business is heading, how they're involved in that, where they're adding value to your goals, where they want to be in a couple of years' time. Think about their career and where they want to be. And it might be that their plan isn't to be with you in the long term, but they could do some work for you that's going to help their career plan and be of use to you. So I think it's very important. What I wouldn't suggest is that you leave feedback for appraisals. If someone does something really well, tell them they've done it. It's really motivating. That's brilliant. And if somebody has messed something up or they're not working in a way that you want them to, tell them straight away. You need to jump on these things. And by all means, bring it up at appraisal time as well, but don't leave it until appraisal time. It shouldn't be a shock. Now, when I talk about performance management, we're talking about underperformance. So very briefly, if somebody's underperforming or they're starting to become on your radar as underperforming, then start noting down examples of things. But don't just sit behind the scenes and write down everything that they're doing wrong. Talk to them. Explain, I didn't like it when you did this, or this didn't achieve our objective of whatever it might be. And make sure that you're logging the things that you're doing, the conversations that you're having, the support you're putting in place, because that will all help speed up the process if we have to do a more formal route. Remember that performance management should be a supportive process. It's not about, oh, we'll get him to do this and he'll mess up on that and then we've got him. It's about making sure that you are giving your employee the skill, the resources and the support to do their job properly. If you're doing that as an employer and they're still not doing the job properly, then we'll dismiss them. But you need to do that supportive bit. If you've done everything that you can, then it makes things much easier when you need to part company with them further down the line. Leavers, believe it or not, someone might want to leave your business at some point. What I call a good, it's good leavers and bad leavers. What I call a good leaver is somebody who's been with you for a couple of years and it's just time for them to move on, so they resign. A lot of employers, I think, completely overlook the value of exit interviews. I think that they're brilliant in terms of helping you change the way that you do things, or at least making you aware of things that aren't working very well. People tend to be quite honest in exit interviews. They've got nothing to lose, they're leaving anyway, that they're almost removed from the politics of a business. And so you can ask quite honest questions. Things like, what triggered them wanting to find another job? What attracted them to their new employer? What would encourage them to stay? What benefits did they value and what benefits did they not value? What did they love about working for you and what was the worst thing? All of these things are really valuable, so you can work on the things that aren't quite right. It may sound really obvious, but when somebody resigns, I advise my clients to make sure that you plan that handover from the day after they've resigned, because anything can happen during a notice period. You might not get a replacement in time. The employee might go off sick. You might want them to use up their holidays, and all of a sudden a month can just disappear. So plan a handover with existing staff where possible. Holidays, we frequently get asked, can I make somebody take their holiday before they leave? Yes, you can. More often than not, you want them there for as long as possible to do a good handover, so you can not give them holidays during that time, but pay them for any holidays that they've accrued up until their leave date. And another one that sounds really obvious, to return equipment, but actually I end up spending a lot of time writing letters to employees asking them to return equipment. And it's silly things like phone chargers and cases for iPads, but just make sure that you kind of do your tick box exercise there and get everything back in before they leave. And the other thing is say thank you. And this might be, you'll have your own culture in your business. It might just be a card that's signed by everybody, or it might be drinks after work, or it might be a bunch of flowers on their last day, or whatever it might be, but just acknowledge it in some way that they've worked for you and they've done a good job whilst they've been with you. Bad leavers. Right, there are 5 fair reasons for dismissal. Redundancy, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, especially over the last few years. I don't know anyone that hasn't been affected by redundancy in some way. Conduct is where an employee behaves in a way that they can't work for you anymore and that you need to dismiss them. Capability we've touched on, that would be covered under performance management. They're not capable of carrying out their role anymore, or it might be for ill health reasons. Statutory duty or restriction. This would be, for example, somebody's visa's expired, maybe they've lost their driving licence or something similar. And SOSR stands for some other substantial reason, and this sounds like a bit of a catch-all, but it's not. It has to be very substantial to keep a tribunal happy, and I mean very serious, say for example somebody's been imprisoned or something like that. Short service, by this I mean somebody that has less than 2 years service. When somebody has less than 2 years service, they don't have the right to bring an unfair dismissal claim. However, if they have a discrimination claim attached with it, then they do. So You don't always need to follow a full procedure when somebody has short service, but always take advice. Never, please don't do this on your own. Please call me before you take any action. So our solution, I'm coming to the end here now. The HR department have retained, all our clients are retained. So you pay a monthly fee and you have unlimited HR advice and guidance. You have legal expenses insurance because you can do absolutely everything perfectly but still get a tribunal claim. We visit you annually. Actually, we visit you much more than that. I can't think of any clients who we only visit annually. But we will sit down with you and talk to you about where you want your business to be and how we can support you moving forward from a HR perspective. We'll make sure that your contract of employment is appropriate for your business. We write a company handbook for you. And these aren't templates that are just downloaded. We write your documents so that they're very specific to you and sound like your business. We update your documents for free when the legislation changes. And the monthly fee that you pay also includes our toolkit system. There is a link to a demo there that you can see that I would encourage you all to have a look at. But this solves all of the problems that I've just been talking about in respect of admin, so recording holidays, sickness absence, managing your appraisals. It reminds you what you need to do and when you need to do it. Employees have access to it because it's online. So they can log in from home and book a holiday, for example, or they can see all the documents that you keep for them that would normally be in a paper file. I don't like paper, I like getting rid of it, so this system just makes me very happy. When somebody leaves, it automatically calculates the holiday entitlement, so you don't have to sit and work out with a calculator who's owed what, and it gets even more confusing when part-timers are thrown into the mix. You can issue documents online. So if you, for example, want to issue your staff handbook, you issue it via the system, and then your employees have to tick a box to say that they've read it, they understand it, and they've received it okay. And then there's no dispute later because they've ticked that box, it's stored online, and tribunals are quite comfortable with that as evidence. So I think it's a really good system, and I would encourage you all to have a look at that demo. I can send you the link afterwards as well if you like. So that's it. I said it would be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them, but I'll be in touch with you all individually over the next few days anyway. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Tracy. What I'll do is I'll see whether we've got any questions that are coming online now. And if there are some that we can take, we can do that. We'll also, after the end of the webinar, if people do want to stay behind and type in questions, we can deal with that either on a private basis with you individually through the question pane, or if we think it's going to be of general interest and it's non-specific, then it's something we can deal with. We're taking a recording of this webinar, which will be topped and tailed, and we'll be putting that up on the YouTube, Daphne's YouTube channel. And also there'll be a version of this PowerPoint presentation available via LinkedIn. So down to me really to sort of summarize what we've been discussing today. And so I've left you with some action points. First of all, using the topics and the pointers that Tracy has identified, perhaps it's time to revisit the basics of HR within your business. And I think one of the key messages coming out for me is that you need to plan for all aspects of the employment journey that Tracy has taken us through. And I think another key thing is where you are unsure, make sure you seek professional advice. There are HR professionals, there are employment lawyers. Make sure you take advice, because if you minimize the risk, then the likelihood of any kind of tribunal claim against you will be lowered. Key thing is, I think, look at using an online resource. We use the HR toolkit internally within Daphne's, and it's incredible the buy-in we've had from the staff, and also in terms of just managing stuff on a day-to-day. And so, as Tracy's already said, there is a link there through to a Vimeo video, which is basically giving you an overview of the HR toolkit. So we've kept to our word. We've just been about half an hour or so. We'll be staying online probably for the next 5 minutes, I would have thought. So if you've got any questions that you want to put into the question pane or anything like that, similarly, if there are any recommendations or anything you would like for us to cover in future topics for these this series of webinars, then please let us know. But apart from that, if you want to log off now, if you don't want to stay around, then thanks for attending, and we'll be in touch over the coming days. Thanks very much.